Hey guys, Travis and stuff here. So I'm back and I'm going to give a brief explanation of all the different types of flush valves in North America. I am going to go over two different types overseas, but generally my knowledge is kind of limited about overseas flush valve technology. So anyway, no commercial is going to be reviewed on this. It's all going to be residential for the most part. Just gravity fed flush valves. So anyway, here's the one of the earliest styles that I know of is called the Douglas style flush valve. Basically, these are all brass, and they have, instead of a flapper like your typical thing, it has a guide arm attached to the overflow tube and a flush ball with a lift rod and lift wire. Um, these started going out of popularity around the 1950s because of cost, and they're all solid brass, so they're obviously expensive to make. They do still make them for retrofit applications, but generally there's not really any modifications you can do to them to make them use less water, because unlike a flapper, which lifts up and there's a hole in the side, lets air out, there's no place for air to get out of these, so they stay open until water's gone. I've seen weighted ones which don't really help the water usage issue, but anyway, on the replaceable parts on these are the guide arm and the ball and the wires and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it for this, and it's 2.5 inch install for normal tanks, and it uses the same lock nut and bottom tank washer as any typical flush valve would. Next, we're going to move over to the flapper style 2.5 inch flapper. This is the most typical one you will find in America. They've been using these since the end of the 1950s. They moved to this design. It's a good style. It works well. You can get them in any water usage, they're very extremely versatile. They're all plastic, they're cheap to make, and they're reliable. So I have really nothing bad to say about these. They use the same lock nut washer as any other flush valve for installation purposes, and they're just a great flush valve altogether. So it's the most common one you'll see in North American plumbing in terms of gravity fed flush toilets. The next one is a flush tower. Now, I'm not a big fan of these for a few reasons. The main reason being that, especially if they're 2.5 inches, they have these struts in the center, which restrict the water flow out of the tank, and also that's really it, to be honest. This particular one I'm illustrating is a Mansfield one. This is the 210 version. A lot of people call the toilet the 210. It's not. It's the flush valve. The flush valve. This is a model 210. The main difference between this and the other one is that this one has a bigger air chamber because it's for a 3.5 gallon toilet. The other ones have a smaller air chamber, which doesn't really do much. Anyway, this one has a gasket on the bottom that can be replaced, and the newer ones have one that's actually on the valve itself. It's not on the plunger. So anyway, that's pretty much it for these. They come in a variety of different styles, and not just Mansfield made them, but they're all basically the same and they function the same way. So the only real disadvantage is that there's struts that restrict the flow of water out of the tank. Next is the Aqua Piston. Personally, I hate this thing because it's so poorly designed that it lets hardly any water out of the tank, which is typical for most modern toilets for the most part. But they're commonly used in Kohler Cimarrons, which aren't the best performing on 1.28 gallons. I'm just going to say that lightly. I hope I don't get dinged for whatever trashing Kohler. I'm not saying Kohler's a bad company. I'm just saying that particular toilet, when it uses 1.28, it doesn't flush very well, and it fails dye tests and stuff like that. It doesn't get all the waste out of the bowl. This particular flush valve, from what I've seen, is not very reliable in terms of seal failures. I've seen, especially in water that's chlorinated, the seals go all the time on these stupid Aqua Pistons. They're not the best design, and they're really cheaply made. So I do not recommend the Aqua Piston, and I think it's a terrible design. Next, we have the tilt flush valve. Now, I haven't heard too much about these. These were common in Canada. The American Standard factories that were over there use these a lot. I haven't seen too many of these in the U.S. at least from my experience. They're a good design. They work a little bit differently than your standard flapper. It's not air that holds the thing open, it's water. And the weight of the water holds the valve open as opposed to the air holding the valve open. But they work pretty good, and they're fairly reliable for the most part. And also you can replace the seals on them, which I like a lot. I like being able to actually replace the seals as opposed to the whole valve because it's cheaper. But anyway, that's pretty much it. And they also have these in different styles because they American Standard also made this thing called a canister flush valve. This is an early canister flush valve. It was all brass, and they went in the master one-piece toilets, and these they don't make those anymore. So they retrofitted these with screws that go down inside the tank to bracket it to the tank because there's no bolts that actually, you can't take the tank off to screw it because it's one piece. So they make retrofits for these, and that's the other variation, but it's basically the same thing, it has the same system. Next to talk about is this. These run in the Champion 4s. This is the canister flush valve. That's what they ended up calling it, I guess. It's a 3-inch flush valve. Oh, so I forgot to mention that the flappers come in 3-inch as well, just because with the more powerful flushes, they want a larger volume water getting in there, cleaning everything, making sure the toilet's going to flush right. Of course, it doesn't work very well in my opinion, but it's a good start anyway. This is an American Standard product. I don't really have too much of a problem with these other than they don't let enough water into the bowl, which is, like I said, is the problem with most modern toilets anyway. I haven't had problems with the Champion 4s. Of course, I haven't personally tested them, so I don't know what to think of them. They're okay, I guess, but I haven't heard bad things about these canister type flush valves. Well, it works okay. It's not bad. Next, these are a little bit of an oddball. These are Elger's China flush valves. When Elger started experimenting in the 50s, and it decided to mold the flush valves into the tank of the toilet, so it doesn't actually have a flush valve, it's actually molded into the ceramic casting. So these use a very strange flapper. Actually, I have one of these toilets, so I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to show you it. Alright, I'm at the toilet. I don't know if you can see in there. This is the China flush valve. This has a flapper that actually bolts on to the bolts for the tank. I don't know if you can see that in there. The bolt for the tank, actually, this sort of flapper. Made another variation of this where they had a little thing on the side of the tank right here. And that actually had a flush ball. They'll go up and down, but they got rid of that. They had problems with the guide arms, so they moved to this design. But those are the two Elger oddballs. They got rid of this pretty quickly when they went into the 1980s. Alright, and now we're off to see the cistern, or more specifically the siphon. Here is a typical siphon. They work very differently. I don't know anything about gallon specs or whatever for these particular valves. These just empty out the tank. So basically, as the name implies, it's a siphon. There's a little plunger in there with a hole in it. The hole lets water into the system. And then when you pull the lever on the tank, the trip lever, it pulls up this wire, which is attached to that plate at the bottom, and it forces water up here and starts to siphon, which empties all the water out of the tank. These are very reliable if they don't break, which are made out of plastic, so occasionally they get cracks in them. The seals go bad. They don't really have very many seals, but if they get any cracks or any type of damage, they won't siphon anymore and they won't work. So I don't have any experience with these, but I would assume that they're very reliable. And then they have these. These are mostly in really old Victorian toilets, like stuff probably pre-1950. They're in high tanks, so not quite as common nowadays. It's a bell, and when you lift the bell falls and displaces the water, and it serves as a siphon, which empties the tank into the bowl. So that's basically how that works. Anyway, that's it for this particular segment. I'm going to do one on ball cocks and fill valves and stuff later. So just keep that in the future. That'll be a future video I do. So anyway, that's it for today. So if you haven't, please like, comment, subscribe, and pop anything you want down in the comments. If you want me to do a video or make a toilet or whatever, just pop it down in the comments and I'll try to get to it as fast as I can. And